The hospital corridors were quiet that night, bathed in the cold glow of fluorescent lights, the hum of machinery the only sound breaking the stillness. David, a janitor who had worked these halls for over a decade, pushed his mop cart down the empty hallway, his footsteps echoing softly against the sterile tiles. He had always believed his job was invisible, just a shadow moving silently while others saved lives. But that night, he would become more than invisible. He would become a lifeline for someone nobody thought could be saved. It started with a chance encounter. David, cleaning near the ICU, overheard a conversation that would haunt him forever. Behind the closed doors, the muffled voices of doctors carried through the thin walls. One doctor, cold and clinical, said words that made David's stomach twist, "Let him die." His heart stopped. Let him die. These words weren't just instructions, they were a sentence. A young boy, no more than 10, lay hooked to life support machines, his frail body struggling against a severe infection. And in that moment, the world seemed to shrink for David. He was just a janitor, just a man who cleaned floors and emptied trash, but he could not ignore the injustice of it. If you believe that kindness can change lives, if you believe in second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Because this story is about how one small act of courage can shake an entire hospital. David had never considered himself a hero. He had bills to pay, a small apartment to maintain, and the routine of a life that often felt invisible. But when he heard those words, something deep inside him stirred, a raw, unrelenting instinct that told him he could not stand by. He thought about the boy's parents, the desperate eyes of a mother who held hope in a hand that trembled with fear. The doctor's decision was final, clinical, almost detached. But David refused to accept it. He refused to let bureaucracy, hierarchy, or indifference decide who deserved life. He lingered outside the ICU door, his mop forgotten, listening to the rhythm of the machines that monitored the boy's frail heartbeat. The boy's name was Alex, and David had seen him in the hospital before, sitting in the waiting room with his father, pale and quiet, trying to smile despite the illness that weighed him down. Alex loved stories. David remembered seeing him clutching a small notebook, drawing superheroes and knights, as if imagining a world where sickness had no power. And David realized, at that moment, that he could not let Alex's story end here. Not on someone else's order. The next hours were a test of courage. David knew he had no medical training beyond first aid, yet he couldn't just walk away. He started by observing. He watched the machines, noting the patterns, the alarms, the fluctuations in Alex's oxygen levels. He noticed things that even the overworked staff had missed, a slight drop in blood pressure, a subtle change in breathing patterns, a hint that the infection had temporarily surged. He felt a surge of adrenaline mixed with fear. One wrong move could cost him his job, or worse, put Alex in more danger. But David's conscience left no room for hesitation. With every passing hour, David's determination grew. He scoured the supply rooms quietly, looking for anything that could stabilize Alex while waiting for doctors to return. He found extra blankets, warmed the room slightly to prevent chills, adjusted the 4 bags that had shifted, all small actions that seemed insignificant to anyone else but could make a subtle difference in a fragile body. While the hospital slept, David became a silent guardian. The morning shift brought chaos. Nurses rushed past, doctors argued over schedules, and Alex's condition teetered between life and death. David stayed nearby, inconspicuous but vigilant. And then, the moment came that tested everything he believed about courage and human dignity. Alex's heart monitor began to flatline. The alarm screamed, piercing the tense air, and nurses rushed in, frantic, shouting orders. David's heart raced. He had seen this before in movies, read about it in books, but now it was real, raw, and terrifying. He knew he couldn't just step back. Without thinking, he pressed his hands against Alex's chest, following the CPR technique he had once learned at a community class years ago. Time slowed. Minutes stretched into eternity. The team looked at him, surprised, hesitant, but David ignored them. He kept pressing, counting silently, willing life to return to the tiny boy whose parents had entrusted the world to the hands of strangers. Sweat dripped down his face, his arms ached, his chest burned, but he refused to stop. The world outside the ICU ceased to exist. There was only Alex, only the fight for breath and heartbeat. And then, a miracle that felt like a whisper of hope, the monitor beeped again. A weak, irregular pulse returned. Alex's chest rose and fell, shallow but alive. David's knees gave out, and he sank to the floor, exhausted, trembling, tears streaming down his face. Around him, the nurses and doctors were in shock. Some clapped him on the back, others were silent, stunned into reverence. That quiet janitor, the man they had barely noticed for years, had pulled a life back from the brink of death. News of what happened spread like wildfire. Hospital staff whispered about the janitor who defied orders, who had ignored the cold calculations of doctors to save a boy no one believed could survive. The parents arrived moments later, unaware of the near tragedy, and when they saw Alex's weak smile, their grief turned into tears of joy. David stood in the corner, wiping his hands, unsure of what to say. Words felt inadequate. But the look in Alex's father's eyes, the gratitude etched across his mother's face, told him everything he needed to know. One person's courage could indeed ripple through the lives of many. David's actions sparked a debate within the hospital. Some doctors criticized him for overstepping, for risking protocol, for undermining the chain of command. But others quietly admired him, recognizing a truth that medicine sometimes forgets, that human compassion can be as vital as science. The story of the janitor who saved Alex became an emblem of hope, shared in staff meetings, newsletters, and eventually online, inspiring countless others to remember the power of action, empathy, and courage. In the weeks that followed, Alex's recovery was slow but steady. David visited quietly, often bringing small surprises, a comic book, a drawing pad, anything to lift the boy's spirits. Alex began to improve, his laughter returning, soft at first, then stronger with each passing day. David watched, often silently, as life reclaimed the boy who had been moments from being forgotten. And in those visits, he felt a bond that transcended job titles, hierarchy, or social expectations. He realized that sometimes, the most profound impact comes from those we least expect. But it wasn't just Alex who was transformed. David himself changed in ways he hadn't anticipated. He had always considered his life ordinary, his contributions invisible. Yet through courage, empathy, and sheer persistence, he had discovered that even the smallest person could make a monumental difference. He no longer saw himself as merely a janitor. He was a protector, a silent warrior, someone who refused to let injustice dictate fate. And every time he walked the hospital corridors, he did so with a quiet pride, knowing that he had done the right thing when it mattered most. Months later, the hospital held a small ceremony. Doctors, nurses, and staff gathered to honor the boy whose life had been saved, and the janitor whose courage had defied expectations. David stood humbly, avoiding the spotlight, while Alex, now smiling and healthy, hugged him tightly. Cameras flashed, applause rang through the hall, but the most important moment wasn't captured on film, it was in the silent gratitude, the bond between two souls connected by bravery and compassion. As the crowd dispersed, David lingered, reflecting on the journey. He thought about all the people who walked these corridors, busy with their own lives, often overlooking the small acts of kindness that could mean everything. He realized that life didn't wait for permission, that opportunity for heroism wasn't reserved for the trained, the powerful, or the prestigious. It was available to anyone willing to act, to anyone willing to put their humanity above fear or protocol. The story of that night became legendary, not just in that hospital, but in the city at large. It was told in newspapers, on social media, and eventually on television. People shared it, not because it was sensational, but because it reminded them of a simple truth: that even in the most clinical, detached, and structured environments, the heart could intervene, and it could save a life. David never asked for recognition. He never wanted fame. For him, the reward was far deeper, the knowledge that a boy had been given a chance at life, that parents had been spared unbearable grief, that hope had been restored where it had almost been extinguished. And as he continued his quiet work in the hospital, sweeping floors and emptying trash, he did so with a smile, knowing that he had left an indelible mark on the lives of those he touched. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you of the power of kindness and courage, please take a moment to like, comment, and share this video. Your engagement helps inspire others to act with compassion, to take chances, and to believe in the extraordinary impact of ordinary people. Before we close, I'd love for you to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed someone do something unexpectedly heroic? Or has someone's small act of kindness ever changed your life? Your stories matter, and your voice can inspire even more good in the world. David's story is a testament to the idea that heroism doesn't always wear a white coat. Sometimes, it comes in the form of a mop, a determined heart, and a refusal to accept that anyone is beyond saving. In the end, it is a reminder that courage, compassion, and empathy are more powerful than fear, apathy, or indifference. And in the quiet, unseen corners of life, that's exactly where heroes are born.